The rejection happened in front of everyone, publicly. Lyra felt it before Rowan even spoke the words. The courtyard was packed with wolves celebrating the full moon gathering. Torches blazing, music drifting through the cold air, laughter echoing across the stone walls of the Ironclaw Pack's fortress. It was supposed to be a celebration. Their celebration. Her engagement to Rowan, the future alpha of the pack. But the moment Rowan stepped onto the raised platform, something inside her chest tightened. Her wolf stirred uneasily. Wrong. The instinct whispered the warning too late. Rowan didn't reach for her hand the way a mate should. He didn't look proud. He looked irritated. The murmurs from the gathered wolves slowly faded as Rowan lifted his hand for silence. The crowd obeyed immediately, their attention shifting toward the heir they expected to lead them one day. Lyra climbed the steps beside him, her heart fluttering with nervous hope. This moment was supposed to seal their future. Rowan glanced down at her. For a second his expression was unreadable. Then he sighed. "Before this ceremony continues," Rowan said loudly, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "there's something I need to correct." A strange ripple moved through the watching pack. Lyra felt her stomach twist. "Correct?" Rowan turned toward her fully now, and for the first time she noticed the cruel glint in his eyes. "This engagement," he continued casually, "was a mistake." The words struck like cold water. Lyra blinked. What?" Soft laughter spread through the crowd. Rowan didn't lower his voice. In fact, he seemed to enjoy the growing attention. "My father believed you were my fated mate," he said, shrugging as if discussing something trivial. "Turns out, he was wrong." A whisper of shock spread through the wolves. Mate bonds weren't small matters, they were sacred. Dangerous to reject. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. "But—" "The bond," she whispered. Rowan scoffed. "What bond?" The crowd stirred again. "Your wolf barely exists," he continued with open mockery. "Half the time I can't even scent it. You think a future alpha should be tied to something that weak?" Humiliation burned hotter than the torches surrounding the courtyard. Dozens of wolves stared, watching, judging, waiting. Her voice trembled. "Rowan, you said—" "I said what I needed to say to keep the elders satisfied," he interrupted sharply. Gasps rippled through the pack, but Rowan wasn't finished. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the cruelty feel intimate. "You were convenient," he said quietly, "but convenient isn't the same thing as worthy." Something inside Lyra Vale's chest cracked. Her wolf whimpered weakly. Rowan straightened and faced the pack. "I, Rowan of Ironclaw Pack," he declared loudly, "reject Lyra Vale as my mate." The words struck like lightning. Pain exploded through Lyra's body. Not emotional pain, physical. The rejection bond burned through her veins like molten silver as the sacred connection shattered. Her knees buckled instantly. She collapsed onto the cold stone. Gasps erupted across the courtyard. Rejections were rare, cruel, and devastating. Lyra struggled to breathe as agony ripped through her chest. Her wolf howled in pain. Rowan stepped back as if she disgusted him. "Someone get her out of here," he muttered. A few wolves laughed. "Pathetic," someone whispered. "I told you she was too weak to be Luna." Lyra pressed shaking hands against the stone, trying desperately to breathe. The rejection had shattered something deep inside her. Just as Rowan turned away, a new scent rolled across the courtyard. Powerful, ancient, every wolf froze. The laughter died instantly. Boots struck the stone. Slow, heavy, unstoppable, the gathered wolves parted instinctively, clearing a path. Because only one wolf carried a presence powerful enough to silence an entire pack without speaking. Lyra lifted her head through blurred vision and saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in dark authority beneath the moon. Alpha King Kyle Valley. He rarely attended pack gatherings. When he did, entire territories paid attention. Tonight he wasn't expected, yet he walked forward with calm, unstoppable purpose. Rowan stiffened before forcing a smile. "Alpha King Kyle Vale," he greeted. "You arrive at an unfortunate moment." Kyle Vale didn't respond. His golden eyes were already locked on the broken wolf kneeling on the ground. Lyra Vale. Her pain scented the air. Something dangerous stirred in the king's expression. He stepped closer, closer, until he stood directly before her. The courtyard held its breath. Lyra tried to stand, but the rejection agony still tore through her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered weakly. Kyle studied her. Then something impossible happened. The Alpha King knelt. Shock rippled through the entire pack. Kings did not kneel, yet Alpha King Kyle Vale lowered himself onto one knee beside her. His hand reached out, not commanding, helping. The moment his fingers touched her, the world changed. A surge of power exploded between them. Lyra gasped. Her wolf roared awake. Kyle's eyes flashed molten gold. Recognition ignited there. Ancient, primal, terrifying. The entire pack felt it. Kyle helped her stand. Then he turned toward Rowan. His voice rolled across the courtyard like thunder. "You rejected her?" Rowan stiffened. "Yes." Kyle nodded once. Then his arm settled firmly around Lyra Vale's shoulders. "She is mine now." The courtyard erupted in shock. Rowan's face went pale. "You can't just claim my rejected mate." Kyle's gaze hardened. "She was never yours." His fingers gently lifted Lyra's chin. The bond pulsed between them again, stronger, deeper, unbreakable. Kyle Vale's voice dropped into a vow the entire world would hear. "You called her worthless." A deadly silence fell. The Alpha King's golden eyes burned with certainty. Yet the moon chose her for a king, and in that moment, the girl the pack mocked as weak became the most protected woman in the Werewolf Kingdom. Chapter 1. The moment the king chose. The courtyard did not breathe. Torches crackled in the night wind, yet every wolf stood frozen as instinct struggled to understand what had just happened. Rejections were brutal, but they were understood. Packs whispered about them for months, then moved on. This was different. Alpha King Kyle Vale's arm rested around Lyra Vale's shoulders as the worst of the rejection pain slowly faded from her body. The moment his hand touched her, something impossible happened. The agony ripping through her chest softened. Warmth replaced it. A strange heat spreading through her veins, like fire learning how to become light. Her wolf stirred. Awake. Rowan stared at them from the platform. "You can't be serious," he snapped. "You felt that surge and decided she's your mate? That's not how this works." A murmur rippled through the watching wolves. No one dared speak loudly. Kyle Vale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "The bond answered," he said calmly. His voice carried across the courtyard with effortless authority. Rowan scoffed. "She's barely a wolf." The insult struck the crowd like a thrown stone. Some wolves shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with fascination, because insulting a woman claimed by the Alpha King was dangerous. Lyra felt Kyle's arm tighten slightly around her shoulders. Not possessive, protective. "You rejected her before confirming the bond," Kyle said. Rowan's jaw tightened. "I know what a mate bond feels like." Kyle's golden eyes sharpened. "Do you?" The quiet question landed heavier than an accusation. Rowan hesitated. Only for a second. But wolves noticed hesitation like sharks smelled blood. Lyra's heart pounded. The bond between her and Kyle Vale pulsed beneath her ribs like a second heartbeat. Rowan crossed his arms. "Even if you're right, she's still worthless to a pack. She can barely shift. My wolves deserve a strong Luna." Some wolves nodded subtly. It wasn't entirely false. Lyra's wolf had always been quiet, muted. Sometimes she wondered if something inside her had been born broken. But Kyle spoke again. "Strength," he said slowly, "is not always loud. The courtyard quieted further. Kyle finally looked down at her. "You survived a rejection," he said calmly. "And you are still standing." Several older wolves nodded. Rejection agony usually shattered a wolf for days. Yet Lyra Vale stood, barely steady, but standing. Rowan waved dismissively. "That doesn't make her worthy of a king." This time a low growl rose from the crowd. Not from Kyle, from the pack. Rowan turned sharply. "What's wrong with all of you?" Kyle's voice cut through the tension. "Enough!" The alpha command dropped like iron. Silence followed instantly. Kyle turned toward Lyra. "You're shaking." "I didn't expect any of this," she admitted softly. A faint hint of amusement touched his mouth. "Neither did I." That surprised her. "You didn't?" "My wolf reacted the moment you fell." Her breath caught. "You felt the rejection?" "Yes." The admission carried quiet weight. Rowan laughed bitterly. "So what now?" he mocked. "You take her home and crown her queen tomorrow?" Kyle turned toward him again. "No." Rowan blinked. Kyle's voice remained calm. "She decides." The courtyard froze again. "Decides what?" Rowan demanded. Kyle glanced at Lyra. "Whether she wants the bond." The words struck her harder than the rejection. Mate bonds were fate, not choices. Yet Alpha King Kyle Vale stood there offering something no one had ever given her before. Choice. Minutes ago she had been humiliated before an entire pack. Now the strongest wolf alive stood beside her, waiting, patient. Rowan scoffed. She'd crawl across broken glass for that offer. The insult burned, but it also sparked something inside her. Lyra stepped forward, out of Kyle's arm. The crowd stirred. She turned toward Rowan first. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. Rowan smirked. "I knew it. I did want to be your mate once." His smile widened. "But not anymore." The words landed like a slap. Lyra turned back toward Kyle. "You said I could choose." "Yes." She took a breath, then placed her hand in his. The bond ignited. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Her wolf rose inside her chest, proud, alive. Kyle's eyes burned gold. "You've just changed the fate of 3 packs," he murmured. Lyra blinked. "What?" Before he could answer, a distant howl echoed through the forest. Not a pack howl, a warning. Kyle's expression darkened instantly. "That," he said quietly, "is why tonight was never going to be peaceful." Another howl answered, closer. Then a gunshot cracked through the night. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Chapter 2. The Wolves Who Came with Bullets. The first gunshot shattered the silence like thunder splitting bone. Wolves moved instantly. Some shifted, some ran, others froze in shock. The celebration courtyard exploded into chaos as instinct took control. Torches overturned, music stopped. The scent of fear surged through the crowd like wildfire, but at the center of the storm, Kyle Vale did not move. His arm remained steady around Lyra, golden eyes scanning the dark tree line beyond the fortress walls. Listening, another gunshot cracked through the forest. Closer this time, a wolf screamed somewhere near the outer gate. The sound tore through Lyra's chest. "Hunters!" someone shouted. Panic rippled through the pack. Hunters were rare. Organized hunters were worse, because normal humans did not carry silver rounds. But the smell drifting through the wind told Kyle everything he needed to know. Silver, oil, gunpowder, preparation. This was not a random attack. It was an ambush. Kyle's voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Form defensive lines." The command carried alpha authority so powerful that even wolves outside his territory obeyed without thinking. Warriors surged toward the gates. Betas barked orders. Half-shifted wolves rushed toward the forest edge. But Kyle's focus remained on Lyra. She was trembling again. Not from rejection pain this time, from instinct. Her wolf was awake, fully awake, and it was confused. The bond between them pulsed violently beneath her skin. "What's happening?" she asked. Kyle's jaw tightened. "You're about to see why I came tonight." Before she could respond, a wolf crashed through the courtyard gate. Blood covered his shoulder, his breathing ragged. "Alpha!" he gasped. Another shot rang out. The wolf collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. The courtyard froze, because standing just beyond the gate were men, 5 of them, black tactical armor, rifles raised, silver rounds glinting beneath the torchlight, and behind them, more movement in the forest. Dozens. Rowan swore violently. They brought an army. The lead hunter stepped forward slowly. His helmet visor reflected the flames of the courtyard torches, cold, emotionless. Then he spoke through a voice amplifier. "Alpha King Kyle Vale." The sound of the king's name echoing through a human weapon made every wolf's fur rise. The hunter continued. "You are under observation by the Sovereign Hunting Authority." The word sent confusion rippling through the wolves. Authority? Hunters didn't usually announce themselves. They killed and disappeared. But this group stood calmly at the gates like soldiers, prepared, organized, dangerous. Kyle's voice was calm, too calm. "You're trespassing." The hunter chuckled through the amplifier. "No." A rifle lifted slightly. "Tonight we're making history." More figures stepped from the forest behind him. 20, 30, maybe more. Everyone armed with silver ammunition. Even Kyle's wolf stirred uneasily beneath his skin. This was not a hunting party. This was an extermination squad. The hunter's helmet tilted slightly. Then he pointed, directly at Lyra. "There she is." The words made the courtyard freeze. Kyle's arm tightened protectively around her shoulders. The hunter's voice carried cold satisfaction. "The anomaly." A ripple of confusion moved through the wolves. Rowan frowned. What the hell are they talking about? But Kyle already knew. Because the moment his skin had touched Lyra's earlier, his wolf had recognized something ancient, something hidden, something dangerous, and apparently the hunters knew too. The lead hunter smiled behind his visor. "Bring us the girl." The rifles lifted. 30 red laser dots flickered across the courtyard. One rested directly over Lyra's heart. The hunter's voice turned cold. "And maybe we let the rest of you live." Silence fell. Heavy, terrifying. Then Kyle Vale did something that made every wolf in the courtyard go still. He stepped forward, placing himself directly between the rifles. And Lyra. His wolf rose beneath his skin like a storm about to break. Golden eyes burned in the torchlight. His voice dropped into a quiet promise. "If you want her." The ground seemed to tremble beneath the weight of the Alpha King's presence. "You'll have to survive me first." The hunters opened fire. Chapter 3. When the Alpha King unleashed his wolf, the hunters fired. Silver rounds tore through the courtyard air like screaming metal insects, ripping sparks from the stone as wolves scattered for cover. Torches shattered. Warriors lunged forward. Half-shifted bodies blurred across the ground in violent motion. But at the center of the chaos, Alpha King Kyle Vale did not retreat. He moved forward. The first bullet struck him in the chest. Gasps erupted from the wolves behind him. Lyra Vale felt the impact through their bond like a violent echo beneath her ribs. But Kyle did not fall. The silver round flattened against his ribs and dropped uselessly to the stone floor. The hunters hesitated, only for a second. But wolves noticed hesitation the way predators noticed weakness. Kyle's voice rolled through the courtyard like thunder. "Enough!" The command wasn't directed at the wolves, it was directed at himself. Because the king's wolf had waited long enough. Kyle stepped into the open courtyard space, placing his body completely between the hunters and Lyra Vale. His shoulders rolled once. Then the shift began. The transformation of ordinary wolves was violent, bone snapping, muscle tearing, skin splitting. But Kyle Vale's shift was something else entirely, controlled, terrifying. Ancient power rippled beneath his skin as his bones lengthened and reshaped, muscle expanding across his shoulders like living armor. Dark fur erupted across his arms and spine as claws carved through the stone beneath his feet. The air thickened. Pressure filled the courtyard like the sky before a storm. Several wolves dropped to their knees instinctively. Even Rowan felt it. The dominance, the raw, overwhelming force of the Alpha King's wolf awakening. Then Kyle lifted his head and roared. The sound wasn't just a wolf's howl. It was something deeper, older. The roar slammed into the hunters like a physical force, rattling their weapons and shattering the fragile calm they had entered the courtyard with. One of the men stumbled backward. Jesus, what is that thing? Another fired again. 3 silver rounds struck Kyle's shoulder. This time they pierced. Blood sprayed across the courtyard stones. But instead of slowing him, the scent of his own blood drove the king's wolf into motion. He moved faster than human eyes could track. One moment he stood in the courtyard. The next, he was at the gate. The first hunter never even screamed. Kyle's claws tore through armor and bone in a single strike, launching the body across the courtyard wall like broken debris. The other hunters opened fire wildly. Silver rounds slammed into stone. 2 wolves shifted and leapt from the courtyard walls, crashing into the attackers with snarling fury. War had begun, and the wolves were no longer retreating. They were hunting. Rowan barked orders near the platform. Ironclaw warriors, push the gate. Half-shifted wolves surged forward beside him. For a moment the pack alpha hesitated. His eyes flickered toward Lyra Vale, standing behind the king's position. Confusion crossed his face, because the girl he had rejected minutes earlier now stood protected by the most powerful wolf alive. But there was no time to dwell on it. Another explosion of gunfire ripped across the courtyard entrance. 3 wolves fell. The hunters were disciplined, organized, and they had numbers. A second line of armored figures emerged from the forest shadows, 20 more, maybe 30. Lyra felt cold dread creep up her spine. This wasn't just an attack. This was a coordinated assault. Then suddenly, a new voice cut across the battlefield. "Your Majesty!" A massive wolf crashed through the courtyard gates from the forest side, shifting mid-stride as he crossed the stone threshold. The transformation ended in a tall warrior with dark hair, broad shoulders, and a scar cutting across one eyebrow. Beta Darius, Kyle's second in command. He skidded to a stop beside Lyra Vale, breathing hard. "They followed us from the northern border," Darius said quickly. "More squads are surrounding the outer walls." Lyra's stomach dropped. "More?" Darius nodded grimly. "They're not here to hunt." Another deafening roar shook the courtyard. Both of them turned. Kyle's wolf had reached the center of the battlefield. And now the hunters understood their mistake. Because this was not just an alpha. This was the Alpha King. Kyle moved like a living shadow between gunshots, claws tearing through armor as his massive wolf form barreled through the hunter's defensive line. Silver rounds pierced his fur again and again, but his healing fought back just as fast. A hunter raised a rifle toward Lyra. He never fired. Kyle's jaws closed around his throat before the trigger pulled. Darius exhaled slowly. Gods, I forgot how terrifying he is when he stops holding back. Lyra couldn't speak, because the bond between her and Kyle pulsed violently now. Every injury he took echoed faintly inside her chest. Every surge of rage rolled through her nerves like thunder. And something inside her wolf was answering. The feeling terrified her, because her wolf had always been quiet, small, barely present, but now It was rising, not weak, not frightened, awake. Darius noticed the change instantly. His sharp gaze shifted toward her. "Interesting," he murmured. Lyra blinked. "What?" But Darius didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her with a soldier's calm focus. Then his eyes flicked toward the battlefield where Kyle's wolf was ripping through another armored hunter. "Your wolf," he said slowly. "It's waking up." Lyra's breath caught. "That's impossible." Darius shook his head. "No." His voice held quiet certainty. "That's exactly what the hunters are here for." A sudden explosion rocked the outer wall. Stones shattered. Hunters poured through the breach like ants spilling from a broken nest. Rowan cursed violently. "We're getting overrun!" Kyle's wolf lifted his blood-streaked muzzle toward the moon and roared again. The sound rolled across the valley like a war drum. Darius cracked his knuckles once. "Well," he said calmly, "I guess we're doing this the hard way." Then he turned to Lyra Vale and gave her a look filled with curiosity. "Stay alive, future queen." Before she could respond, Beta Darius shifted. Bone snapped. Fur exploded across his shoulders. A massive grey wolf landed on the courtyard stone beside her. Then he launched himself straight into the battle, leaving Lyra Vale standing alone at the center of the storm. And deep inside her chest, her wolf finally opened its eyes, far out in the dark forest beyond the fortress walls. A hidden hunter watched the battle through thermal scopes. He spoke quietly into a radio. "Target confirmed." A pause. Then the final command came through the speaker. "Proceed to Phase 2. The hunter smiled beneath his helmet and aimed a weapon, unlike the others, directly at Lyra Vale. The trigger began to tighten. Chapter 4. The wolf that was never supposed to wake. The hunter squeezed the trigger. The weapon didn't fire like the others. No loud gunshot, no explosive crack. Instead, a sharp metallic hiss cut through the chaos as a specialized silver bolt launched across the courtyard. Thin, fast, designed for precision rather than noise. Designed for a single target, Lyra Vale. The moment it left the barrel, the bond between her and Alpha King Kyle Vale screamed. Not in words, in instinct. Across the battlefield, Kyle's massive black wolf froze mid-attack. His golden eyes snapped toward the courtyard center with terrifying speed. Too far. He was too far away. The bolt screamed toward Lyra's heart. Time seemed to slow. She saw it coming, but her body refused to move, not from fear, from something stranger, something rising deep inside her chest. The pain from Rowan's rejection earlier still lingered like a cracked mirror inside her soul, but now another force pressed against that fracture from the inside. Pressure, heat, awakening, her wolf. For years it had been silent, muted, barely present. Pack wolves whispered that Lyra Vale had been born incomplete, weak. But in that moment, something ancient stirred beneath her ribs, not weak, sleeping. The silver bolt cut through the air, 10 feet away, 5, 3, and suddenly the world exploded with sound. A roar ripped across the battlefield so violently it rattled the courtyard walls. Kyle, his wolf, abandoned the hunters instantly, launching across the courtyard like living thunder, but he was still too far. The bolt would reach her first, and that was the exact moment Lyra's wolf woke up. Her spine arched as heat tore through her veins, the suppressed instinct inside her exploding awake like wildfire finally touching dry forest. A surge of primal power burst outward from her body, invisible, but overwhelming. The silver bolt never touched her. Half a foot from her chest, it stopped, not deflected. Stopped, suspended in mid-air like an insect trapped in amber. The courtyard fell silent. Hunters froze. Wolves stared. Even Rowan stopped fighting, because the impossible had just happened. Lyra stared at the floating bolt inches from her heart. What? The energy surrounding her pulsed once. Then the bolt shattered. Silver fragments rained harmlessly onto the stone floor. Kyle landed beside her a heartbeat later, claws carving deep trenches into the courtyard stone. His wolf stood over her protectively, massive body shielding her from the battlefield. But he wasn't looking at the hunters anymore. He was staring at Lyra Val, not with fear, with realization, because the energy that had burst from her moments earlier carried a scent older than any pack territory, older than the Veiled Dominion itself. Ancient blood. Behind them, Beta Darius tore through the last hunter near the gate before skidding to a halt beside the king's wolf. His eyes shifted between Kyle and Lyra, then slowly widened. "Well," Darius muttered under his breath. "That explains a lot." Lyra barely heard him. Her entire body trembled with unfamiliar strength. Her senses had sharpened suddenly. She could hear every heartbeat in the courtyard, smell the iron tang of blood, feel the cold wind brushing across her skin like fingers. Her wolf stirred fully inside her mind for the first time in her life, powerful and furious. Across the battlefield, the remaining hunters slowly backed toward the broken gate. Their leader lowered his rifle, but instead of looking afraid, he looked satisfied. "Confirmed," he said calmly into his radio. "Subject is active." The words sent a ripple of confusion through the wolves. "Subject?" Kyle's wolf growled low in his chest. The sound rolled across the courtyard like thunder promising a storm. But before he could advance, a new voice echoed from the fortress entrance. "Stop." The single word carried the weight of age and authority. Every wolf turned. An elderly woman stepped slowly into the torchlight, leaning slightly on a carved wooden staff. Her silver hair was braided down her back, and the ancient tattoos of pack law curled across the skin of her hands. "Pack Eldamira." Even Kyle's wolf lowered his head slightly in respect. Mira's sharp gaze moved across the battlefield. Hunters. Blood. Then finally, Lyra. The moment their eyes met, Mira's breath caught the old woman stared, as if seeing a ghost rise from a forgotten grave. "Moon above," she whispered. Lyra felt suddenly exposed beneath that gaze. "What is it?" Mira stepped forward slowly. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something deeper. Recognition. "I prayed the old prophecy had died with the last Veiled Queen." The courtyard fell completely silent. Rowan frowned. "What prophecy?" Mira didn't answer him. Her eyes remained locked on Lyra Val. "Child," she said quietly, "your wolf was never weak." The words felt like a stone dropping into still water. Ripples spread across the watching wolves. Lyra's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Then what is it?" Mira's expression turned grave. "Royal." A collective breath sucked through the courtyard. Kyle's wolf stiffened. Because there had only ever been one bloodline capable of power, like what Lyra had just shown. The ancient queens of the Veiled Dominion. Wolves who could command instinct itself. Wolves whose presence could bend pack hierarchies. Wolves who could stop Silver. Rowan shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible." Mira turned toward him slowly. "No." Her voice hardened. "What's impossible is that you rejected her." Rowan's face drained of color. Because suddenly the humiliation of earlier looked much worse. The hunter leader chuckled softly from the gate. "Well," he adjusted his weapon. "Looks like the old woman figured it out." Every wolf turned toward him again. The hunter tapped the side of his helmet. "You think we came here for sport?" His rifle slowly lifted again. This time, not at Lyra. At Kaya. "We came because the royal bloodline was supposed to be extinct." The hunter's smile widened behind the visor. "And now we know it isn't." The battlefield fell into a terrifying silence. Because suddenly this attack wasn't just a hunt. It was a war declaration. Kyle's wolf stepped forward slowly, placing his massive body between Lyra and every weapon in the courtyard. His golden eyes burned like molten metal. The bond between them pulsed fiercely, protective, unbreakable, and his voice, half human, half wolf, rumbled through the night air. "No one touches my queen." The hunters opened fire again, and this time, the war truly began. Chapter 5. The Secret. The moon hid inside Lyra Vale. The war drums had not stopped. Even hours after the hunters' first attack was driven back from the Ironclaw forest, tension still hung over the pack fortress like storm clouds waiting to break again. Smoke curled faintly from the burned tree line beyond the walls. Silver bullets had been fired. Hunters had crossed sacred territory, and that meant one thing. War was coming. Inside the fortress council chamber, wolves gathered around the ancient stone table carved with the sigils of the first packs, alphas, betas, elders. Every leader present understood the same dangerous truth. Hunters never attacked alone, not without a reason. At the head of the chamber stood Alpha King Kyle Vale. His presence alone filled the room like a living force. The Alpha King had not taken a seat. Kings rarely did during council. They stood, watching, listening, judging. Behind him stood Beta Darius, silent and vigilant as always. Across the chamber, Pack Elder Mira leaned heavily on her carved staff, ancient eyes studying the room with quiet intensity. But none of them were the center of the room's attention. That belonged to the woman standing beside the king, Lyra Vale. Hours ago, she had been a rejected Omega. Now she stood at the side of the most powerful wolf alive. Some wolves still struggled to understand how the world had shifted so quickly. Others watched her with something closer to unease, because the bond sent between Lyra Vale and Alpha King Kyle Vale had grown stronger since the courtyard. Not weaker, stronger, which meant the claim had not been impulsive. It had been real. Kyle's golden eyes swept across the council. "Report, one word." The room immediately obeyed. A scout stepped forward. 3 hunter squads crossed the western border tonight. Silver rounds confirmed. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Silver meant preparation, money, organization. Another scout spoke next. They had tranquilizers too. That made Beta Darius stiffen slightly. Tranquilizers? Yes. The scout hesitated. Designed for wolves. The room went silent. Hunters who carried specialized weapons usually hunted something valuable. Or someone. Kyle's gaze darkened slightly. Did they reach the village? No, Your Majesty. Our patrol stopped them. Alive? One. Kyle nodded once. Interrogate him. Darius stepped forward. It's already underway. The Alpha King didn't respond immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted slowly across the council table. Then it landed on Pack Elder Mira. You've been quiet. The old woman's lips curved faintly. Because everyone else is asking the wrong question. A few wolves frowned. Kyle tilted his head slightly. Explain. Pack Elder Mira tapped her staff once against the stone floor. The sound echoed through the chamber. Hunters don't risk entering 3 pack territories at once, she said calmly. Not unless they believe something extremely valuable is here. Another murmur spread across the room. Rowan, standing near the edge of the council circle, folded his arms. Or they just got lucky. The elder's gaze slid toward him slowly. No, one word, sharp as a blade. Then her eyes turned toward Lyra Vale. The room went still. Lyra felt every gaze shift toward her instantly. Her stomach tightened. "Why are you looking at me?" she asked quietly. Pack Elder Mira studied her like someone examining a puzzle. "Because," the elder said slowly, "something ancient woke tonight." The council shifted uneasily. Kyle did not move, but his attention sharpened. "Clarify." Pack Elder Mira stepped closer to Lyra Vale. The old wolf lifted her hand gently. "May I?" Lyra hesitated, but Kyle gave a small nod. The elder pressed her fingers lightly against Lyra's wrist. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the torches flickered. A faint pulse of energy rippled outward through the chamber. Pack Elder Mira inhaled sharply. Her eyes widened. Impossible. The council erupted into confused whispers. Kyle stepped forward instantly. What did you feel? The elder slowly removed her hand. Her gaze remained locked on Lyra Val. But now there was something new in her expression. Not curiosity. Reverence. A dormant bloodline. The words fell into the room like thunder. Lyra blinked. What? But Pack Elder Mira wasn't looking at her anymore. She was looking at the king. Your Majesty, she said quietly, your mate is not a weak wolf. The room leaned closer. Then what is she? Kyle asked. The elder's voice dropped to a near whisper. One of the last. Silence spread across the chamber. Even the air felt heavier. Lyra's heart started racing. One of the last what? Pack Elder Mira's ancient eyes met hers again, and the answer changed everything. Moonborn. The words seemed to echo. Some wolves gasped, others looked confused. But Beta Darius stiffened sharply, because he knew exactly what that meant. Kyle's expression didn't change, but something primal stirred behind his golden eyes. Explain. Pack Elder Mira leaned on her staff. Before the modern packs existed, she said slowly, there were wolves who carried the direct blessing of the moon itself. Ancient fear rippled through the council. They were stronger than alphas, more whispers, faster than hunters, more tension. And their bonds, she continued quietly, could change the balance of the entire werewolf world. Lyra felt dizzy. That sounds like a legend. Pack Elder Mira shook her head. No. Her gaze turned toward the Alpha King again. It sounds like destiny. Kyle remained very still, then slowly. His hand reached for Lyra's. Their fingers intertwined. The bond between them pulsed once, bright, alive. And suddenly everything made terrifying sense. Hunters, attacks, the bond surge in the courtyard. Kyle's wolf reacting instantly. The elder spoke the final truth into the silent chamber. They weren't hunting the packs. Her staff struck the floor once. They were hunting her. Every wolf in the chamber turned toward Lyra Val, the rejected Omega, the king's mate, the last moonborn wolf, and far beyond the fortress walls. Something else had already sensed her awakening. Chapter 6. Rowan discovers the truth about Lyra Vale. Rowan did not believe in fate, not truly. He believed in power, strength, dominance. The laws that had built packs for centuries were simple. The strongest ruled, the weak served, and the useless were cast aside before they poisoned the bloodline. It was a clean system, a logical one, which was why Rowan had never doubted his decision to reject Lyra Vale. Until tonight. The Ironclaw Fortress courtyard still smelled faintly of gunpowder and silver even hours after the hunters' attack had been driven back. Wolves moved through the grounds repairing damage, reinforcing defenses, whispering nervously about what had happened. But Rowan wasn't paying attention to any of it. He stood alone on the stone balcony overlooking the forest, watching the moon, trying to quiet the strange unease crawling beneath his skin. Footsteps approached behind him. Rowan didn't turn. "Report," he said impatiently. The scout bowed slightly. "We captured one of the hunters." Rowan frowned. "Alive?" "Yes, Alpha. That was unusual. Hunters rarely survived long enough to be questioned." "Bring him to the holding room." Moments later, Rowan entered the underground chamber where the hunter had been restrained. The man looked exhausted, bruised, but strangely calm. Rowan leaned against the stone wall, studying him. "Why were you in my territory?" The hunter smirked. "You think this is about your territory?" Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Then explain it to me." The hunter's gaze drifted lazily across the chamber, then settled back on Rowan. "You rejected her tonight, didn't you?" The question hit Rowan like a slap. "What?" The hunter laughed softly. "The girl," Rowan's chest tightened slightly. "You came here for a rejected Omega?" The hunter's smile widened. "That's the funny part." He leaned forward slightly despite the chains. "She's not an Omega." Rowan felt irritation rise. "Then what is she?" The hunter's eyes gleamed. "The most valuable wolf alive." Silence filled the room. Rowan scoffed. "You expect me to believe that?" The hunter shrugged. "Our employers do." Rowan's patience snapped. "Who hired you?" The hunter said nothing, but his grin returned. "You should have kept her." The words hit harder than Rowan expected. For the first time since the courtyard, a tiny crack of doubt appeared in his certainty. "What do you mean?" The hunter leaned back casually. "You threw away something kings start wars over." Rowan felt his stomach twist. "That's impossible." But the hunter just laughed again. "Then why do you think the Alpha King showed up?" The question echoed through Rowan's mind like thunder, because that was the part he still couldn't explain. Why had Alpha King Kyle Vale appeared exactly when the rejection happened? Why had the bond between him and Lyra Vale ignited instantly? Rowan turned abruptly. "Kill him," he ordered the guards. Then he walked out of the chamber, but the hunter's final words followed him up the stairs. "You rejected a miracle, Alpha." Rowan clenched his jaw, and for the first time since that night began, regret crept quietly into his chest. Chapter 7. The enemy Alpha reveals himself, far beyond Ironclaw territory, deep within the northern mountains where even wolves rarely traveled. A fortress carved into black stone overlooked a frozen valley. Torches burned along the battlements. Guards patrolled the walls. Inside the throne chamber, a massive wolf pelt covered the stone floor before a throne made of iron and bone. A man sat there, silent, waiting. His eyes were darker than midnight, his presence colder than winter. The enemy Alpha had ruled the northern rogue territories for nearly 2 decades. He had crushed rival packs, broken hunters, turned monsters into allies. But tonight, he was smiling. A scout knelt before him. The hunters confirmed it. The enemy Alpha leaned forward slowly. "Say it again." The scout swallowed. "The moonborn bloodline has awakened." Silence. Then the Alpha laughed softly. A low, dangerous sound. "How long?" "Tonight, my lord." The scout hesitated, and the Alpha King claimed her. That made the smile widen. So, Alpha King Kyle Vale found her first. Interesting. Very interesting. The Alpha rose from the throne. His wolf stirred beneath his skin. "Prepare the war council." The scout bowed quickly. "Yes, my lord." As the chamber emptied, the Alpha walked toward the open balcony overlooking the valley. The moon hung high above the mountains, bright, ancient, watching. At last the Alpha murmured. His claws scraped lightly across the stone railing. For centuries the moonborn line was hidden. His smile sharpened. But now she's alive. And that meant everything was about to change. "Send word to the hunters," he said quietly. "Double the reward." The wind howled through the valley. Because somewhere far to the south, Lyra Vale had just become the most hunted woman in the werewolf world. Chapter 8. Lyra Vale's first true transformation. The moon was rising again. Inside the king's fortress, the training grounds were quiet except for the sound of wind brushing against the stone walls. Torches flickered. Shadows stretched across the sand. And at the center of the arena stood Lyra Vale, nervous, confused, and exhausted. Across from her stood Alpha King Kyle Vale, watching, patient. "You're sure this is necessary?" she asked quietly. Kyle nodded once. Yes. Her hands clenched slightly. I've barely been able to shift my entire life. I know. Then why now? Kyle stepped closer. The bond between them pulsed gently, because since the council chamber revelation, everything had changed. Pack Elder Mira's words echoed constantly in Lyra's mind. Moonborn. She still wasn't sure she believed it. Kyle stopped a few steps away. The hunters are coming, he said simply. So are other wolves. His voice lowered slightly. You need to know what you are. Lyra swallowed. And what if I fail? Kyle's gaze softened slightly. You won't, but what if I do? The king didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. His voice dropped into a quiet promise. Then I'll stand between you and the entire world until you learn. Her breath caught. The bond flared warmly. Kyle stepped back. Now listen carefully. He pointed toward the moon rising above the fortress walls. Moonborn wolves don't force the shift. Lyra frowned. Then how? They surrender to it. That sounded terrifying. What if I lose control? Kyle's eyes glowed faintly gold. You won't, because I'll be here. Something steady settled inside her chest. Slowly, Lyra closed her eyes. The moonlight touched her skin. Her breathing slowed. She felt it then. A strange warmth deep in her bones. Not pain, not fear. Something older, something powerful. Her wolf. For years it had been quiet, weak, hidden. But now it was rising. Lyra gasped as energy surged through her body. Her fingers trembled. Her senses sharpened suddenly. She could hear the wind moving across distant trees, smell the iron in the training arena sand, feel Kyle's heartbeat across the space between them. Good, Kyle murmured. Don't fight it. The power grew stronger. Her wolf pushed forward. Claws began to form. Bones shifted. Lyra cried out as the transformation surged through her body. Kyle didn't move, didn't interfere. He simply watched. And when the transformation finished, the wolf standing in the arena was unlike any Kyle had ever seen. Silver-white fur, eyes glowing like molten moonlight, larger than a normal she-wolf, stronger, ancient. The Moonborn had awakened. Lyra looked down at herself in shock, then back at Kyle. His wolf surged forward instantly. He bowed his head slightly, not as a king, but as a mate greeting his equal, and in that moment, both of them understood the same truth. The war that was coming would not just decide territory. It would decide the fate of the entire werewolf world. Chapter 9. Rowan begs for forgiveness. The moon had barely set when Rowan arrived at the king's fortress. He came alone. That alone was enough to make the wolves guarding the outer gate tense. Because an alpha never approached another alpha's territory alone unless the matter was serious or desperate. Steel gates towered above him, carved with ancient runes marking the domain of Alpha King Kyle Vali. The guards crossed their spears. State your purpose. Rowan's jaw tightened. I'm here to speak with the king. The guards exchanged looks. One of them disappeared inside the fortress. Minutes passed. Rowan stood perfectly still, refusing to show weakness despite the cold wind cutting across the stone bridge. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind all night. But the words still tasted like ash. Finally, the gates creaked open. A familiar figure stepped out. Beta Darius, tall, immovable, eyes sharp as blades. His gaze swept over Rowan slowly. You have courage coming here. Rowan forced himself not to react. I didn't come for you. Darius gave a faint smile. No, you came for her. Rowan's silence confirmed it. Darius stepped aside. The king will see you. Rowan walked through the gates. The fortress courtyard buzzed with activity. Warriors trained, scouts prepared supplies, and patrols rotated constantly along the walls. War preparation. The hunters' attack had changed everything. At the far end of the courtyard stood two figures. One of them made Rowan's chest tighten instantly. Lyra Vale. She stood beside Alpha King Kael Vale, her silver hair catching the early morning light. Something about her looked different now. Stronger. Alive in a way Rowan had never seen before. Kael's gaze lifted as Rowan approached. The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop. "You have 5 seconds," the king said calmly. Rowan stopped several feet away. His pride screamed at him to leave, but he stayed. "I came to speak with Lyra." Kael's golden eyes hardened. "You forfeited that right." Rowan's fists clenched. "I know." The admission surprised even him. For a moment silence stretched between them. Then Rowan looked at Lyra Vale. Really looked. "I made a mistake." The words felt like tearing his own skin open. Lyra's expression didn't change. Rowan took a slow breath. "I thought you were weak." The courtyard had grown quiet. Several wolves stopped training to listen. "I thought rejecting you was the smartest decision I could make." His voice lowered. "But I was wrong." Lyra studied him calmly. For years Rowan had been the center of her world. Now he felt like a stranger. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. Rowan swallowed. "Another chance." The words barely left his mouth before a growl rolled through the courtyard. Not from the warriors, from the king. Alpha King Kael Vale didn't move. But his wolf surged beneath the surface. The ground itself seemed to tense beneath the weight of his dominance. "You rejected her publicly," Kael said. "Yes." "You humiliated her." Rowan nodded stiffly. "Yes." Kael's eyes burned brighter. "And now you come begging?" Rowan forced himself not to look away. "Yes." The courtyard held its breath. But it was Lyra Vale who answered. Her voice was calm, clear, certain. "You're too late." Rowan's chest tightened painfully. "I know," but he took one step closer anyway. "Just tell me one thing." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "What?" Rowan's voice cracked for the first time. "Did you ever actually love me?" Silence stretched across the courtyard. Lyra thought about it. Then she nodded once. "Yes." The word cut deeper than rejection. Rowan closed his eyes briefly. "But you don't anymore," he guessed. Lyra shook her head slowly. "No." She glanced briefly at Alpha King Kael Vale. Her bond with him pulsed quietly. "Because now I know what real strength feels like." Rowan looked at the king, and for the first time, he truly understood the scale of the mistake he had made. Chapter 10. The enemy Alpha attacks the king's fortress. The attack came at night, fast, brutal, without warning. The first explosion shattered the outer wall. Stone blasted outward as silver-tipped rockets slammed into the fortress defenses. Alarm horns screamed across the valley. "Attack!" Warriors poured onto the battlements. Torches flared, steel flashed. And across the dark forest below the fortress, an army emerged. Not hunters this time. Wolves, hundreds of them. Rogue packs, mercenaries, all marching beneath a single black banner. Standing at the front of that army was the man commanding them, the enemy Alpha. His eyes glowed like embers beneath the moon. He raised one hand. The wolves behind him howled, a battle cry that rolled across the valley like thunder. Inside the fortress courtyard, warriors shifted instantly into wolf form. Claws scraped stone, teeth flashed. And at the center of it all stood Alpha King Kael Vale, calm, unmoving, watching the approaching army. Beta Darius stepped beside him. 300 wolves at least. Kael nodded slightly. And the hunters? Behind them? Of course they were. An alliance between rogue wolves and human hunters, something unheard of. Until now. Kyle's gaze hardened. They want her, Darius nodded. Then they'll have to go through us. Kyle's wolf surged forward. The transformation ripped through his body in seconds. Massive, black-furred, eyes blazing gold. The Alpha King's wolf towered over every other wolf in the courtyard. He threw his head back and howled. The sound shook the fortress walls, and every loyal wolf answered. The war had begun. Chapter 11. Lyra Vale's moonborn power shocks the entire pack. The battle exploded across the fortress walls. Claws tore through armor. Wolves collided in brutal bursts of violence. Silver bullets cracked through the air as hunters fired from the tree line. Blood soaked the stone battlements. But the true shock of the night had not yet arrived. Inside the courtyard, Lyra Vale stood frozen, watching the chaos. Fear surged through her chest. "I can't fight like them," she whispered. Beside her, Pack Elder Mira shook her head. "You don't fight like them. Then what do I do?" The elder pointed toward the moon. "Listen." Lyra lifted her eyes. The moon hung huge above the battlefield, bright, ancient, calling. Her wolf stirred again, stronger than before. The power rising inside her chest felt different now. Bigger, wilder. "Let it out," Mira whispered. Lyra closed her eyes. The sounds of battle faded. The screams, the claws, the gunshots. All of it dissolved beneath the rhythm of the moon's pull. Then she shifted. The transformation exploded outward like lightning. Silver light rippled across the courtyard. Wolves nearby staggered backward in shock, because the wolf that emerged was not ordinary. Her fur glowed faintly beneath the moonlight. Her eyes burned like living starlight, and when Lyra Vale lifted her head and howled, the battlefield froze. Every wolf stopped fighting. Every hunter lowered their weapon. Even the enemy Alpha turned toward the fortress in stunned silence, because the sound that rolled across the valley was not just a wolf's howl. It was something older, something sacred, the call of the moonborn, and every wolf alive felt its power, including Alpha King Kyle Vale. His wolf turned toward her instantly, recognition blazing in his golden eyes, because in that moment, the rejected Omega had become the most powerful wolf on the battlefield. And the war had just taken a terrifying new turn. Chapter 12. The enemy Alpha reveals his true goal. The battlefield went quiet. Not completely. Claws still scraped stone. Hunters still reloaded their rifles. Wounded wolves still groaned somewhere along the walls. But the moment Lyra Vale howled, something ancient moved through the valley. Every wolf felt it, the call of the moonborn. Even the army attacking the fortress hesitated. At the front of the invading force, the enemy Alpha stared toward the battlements with sharp fascination. "So it's true," he murmured. The scout beside him shifted nervously. "My lord?" The Alpha smiled slowly. The bloodline survived. His eyes gleamed with something darker than excitement. Triumph. He stepped forward across the battlefield, raising one hand. Instantly his wolves halted their advance. Even the hunters paused, confused by the sudden order. Across the fortress wall, Alpha King Kyle Vale watched him closely. Kyle's massive black wolf stood among his warriors like a living shadow. Golden eyes locked onto the invader. Predator meeting predator. The enemy Alpha raised his voice so it carried across the battlefield. "I didn't come for your fortress, King." His gaze lifted toward the battlements, toward the silver wolf standing there. "I came for her." Murmurs rippled through both armies. Kyle's wolf snarled. The sound vibrated through the valley like distant thunder, but the enemy Alpha simply laughed. "You don't understand what she is yet." The king's wolf lowered its head slightly. "A warning. You think she's your mate." His smile widened. But the moonborn were never meant to belong to one wolf. The battlefield grew tense. "What do you want?" Kyle's voice finally echoed across the valley after shifting back to human form. The enemy Alpha answered without hesitation. "Ha!" Gasps erupted along the fortress wall. He spread his arms slightly. "Give me Lyra Val, and I'll end the war tonight." Silence followed. Then Kyle laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the sound of a king who had just been insulted. "You brought an army to my gates," Kyle said quietly. "And you still think I negotiate?" His golden eyes burned. "You came to steal what the moon gave me." The king's wolf surged again beneath his skin. "That was your first mistake." The enemy Alpha's smile faded. "Then the blood tonight will be on your hands." He lowered his hand. The army behind him roared. The battle resumed. But now everyone understood something terrifying. This war had never been about territory. It had always been about Lyra Val. Chapter 13. Lyra Val saves the king's life. The battle exploded again, this time even more violently. Wolves clashed across the fortress walls. Hunters fired silver rounds from the forest edge. Explosions shattered sections of the outer defenses. In the center of it all fought Alpha King Kyle Vale. His black wolf tore through enemy warriors like a storm-given claws. Every movement was lethal, precise, but even kings could bleed. Across the battlefield, the enemy Alpha watched patiently, waiting, calculating. Then he moved, faster than anyone expected. His transformation ripped through his body mid-stride, bones cracking as a massive grey wolf burst forward, larger than most, older, scarred from decades of war. His claws tore through the battlefield toward Kyle. The two Alphas collided like colliding mountains. Their impact shattered the stone beneath them. Wolves nearby scattered instantly. Because when two dominant Alphas fought, no one else survived the space between them. Kyle struck first. His jaws snapped toward the enemy's throat. The enemy Alpha twisted aside and raked claws across Kyle's shoulder. Blood sprayed across the stone. A roar erupted from Kyle's wolf. They clashed again, teeth, claws, fury. But the enemy Alpha wasn't fighting alone. From the forest line, a hunter aimed, silver rifle raised, target locked, on the king. The shot cracked through the battlefield. Lyra heard it. Her wolf's instincts screamed. Without thinking, Lyra Vale leapt from the battlements. Her silver wolf hit the ground like falling lightning. She sprinted across the battlefield. The bullet flew straight toward Kyle's heart. And then, Lyra slammed into him. The silver round struck her shoulder instead. Pain exploded through her body. She collapsed beside him. Kyle's wolf turned instantly, golden eyes blazing with horror. The king shifted back to human form immediately. "Lyra!" She lay in the dirt, silver blood staining the battlefield. The wound smoked where the silver touched her skin. Kyle's hands pressed against it desperately. "Stay with me." Lyra's eyes fluttered. "I told you," she whispered weakly. Kyle's voice shook. "Told me what?" She smiled faintly despite the pain. "I wouldn't let you face the world alone." The king's wolf howled in rage, and the battle grew even more savage. Chapter 14. Rowan redeems himself in battle. The battlefield had become chaos, walls burning, wolves bleeding, hunters firing from every direction. But Rowan had only seen one thing, Lyra falling. The sight hit him harder than any blade. For a moment he froze, because the girl he had rejected had just taken a bullet meant for another wolf, for the king, for a man who hadn't even known her a day before. Something inside Rowan snapped. He shifted instantly. His wolf burst forward across the battlefield with a roar of fury. Hunters aimed their weapons, too slow. Rowan crashed into them like a hurricane. Claws ripped rifles from hands, teeth tore through armor. 3 hunters fell in seconds, more rushed forward. Rowan fought them all, not for pride, for redemption. Across the battlefield, Beta Darius noticed immediately. "He's holding the west gate alone," Darius said. Kyle glanced up from where he knelt beside Lyra. His golden eyes narrowed. Rowan's wolf tore through another hunter squad. Silver rounds ripped across his side. He didn't slow, didn't retreat, didn't stop. For the first time since the rejection. Rowan fought like a wolf who had something worth dying for. Chapter 15. The moon bond between Lyra and Kyle fully awakens. The silver bullet should have killed her. Everyone knew it. Silver destroyed wolves from the inside out. But Lyra Vale was not an ordinary wolf. As Kyle held her in his arms, something strange began to happen. The moonlight above the battlefield brightened, not naturally, unnaturally, like the sky itself had leaned closer. Pack Elder Mira gasped from the battlements. "The bond!" Kyle looked down at Lyra. Her wound was glowing faintly. Silver light spread through her veins instead of destroying them. Her wolf stirred again, stronger, alive. Kyle felt it then. The bond between them surged. Their souls snapped together like two halves of something long broken. Lyra's eyes opened, but they were no longer normal. They burned with moonlight. "Kyle," she whispered. The king felt power ripple through his own body. His wolf answered her instinctively. The battlefield felt it. Every wolf turned, because when Lyra Vale rose from the ground, the silver wound had already begun to heal. And when she stepped beside Alpha King Kyle Vale, the air itself trembled. Two wolves, one bond. The moon bond had awakened, fully, completely, unbreakable. Across the battlefield, the enemy Alpha watched with dark fascination. "Well," he murmured, "now things get interesting, because the war had just entered its final phase, and the moonborn queen had finally awakened." Chapter 16. The king and the moonborn lead the counterattack. The battlefield had changed. Moments earlier, wolves had fought like soldiers defending stone and territory. Now they fought like something older, something awakened. At the center of the fortress courtyard stood Lyra Vale beside Alpha King Kyle Vale. Moonlight poured over them. The bond between them pulsed like a living heartbeat through the battlefield. Every wolf felt it, even enemies, even the hunters. The moon bond had awakened. Kyle rose slowly from where he had knelt beside her. Blood still streaked across his chest from the earlier fight, but his posture radiated calm dominance. His golden eyes swept across the battlefield. Then he spoke one word. "Enough!" The command rolled across the fortress walls like thunder. His wolves immediately stilled. Even the chaos of battle hesitated under the force of the king's authority. Kyle looked at Lyra Vale. "Are you ready?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of war. Lyra's silver wolf stirred beneath her skin again. The pain from the silver bullet had vanished completely. In its place was something stronger, something burning. "I am," she said quietly. Kyle nodded. Then he turned toward the battlefield below. The enemy Alpha still stood beyond the shattered outer wall with his army, waiting, watching. Kyle's voice lifted across the valley. "You wanted her." The enemy army shifted nervously. "Now you face both of us." Kyle's transformation exploded outward. The king's massive black wolf landed beside Lyra with a thunderous impact. Lyra shifted instantly beside him. Silver light rippled through the courtyard as her wolf emerged once more. For a moment the battlefield froze. Black wolf, silver wolf, king and moonborn. Then Kyle surged forward, and the counterattack began. Wolves poured out of the fortress gates like a living storm. The tide of the war had turned. Chapter 17. The enemy Alpha's secret past with Kyle. The battlefield split as the two Alpha wolves collided again. Claws struck. Teeth snapped. The impact of their bodies cracked the frozen ground beneath them. The enemy Alpha twisted away from Kyle's attack and laughed. Still predictable. Kyle's wolf growled deeply. "You should have stayed dead." The enemy smiled wider. "Brother," the word froze the battlefield around them. Even Kyle hesitated. The enemy Alpha shifted back to human form slowly, blood dripping down his arm. "You never told your wolves about me." Kyle's golden eyes darkened. "You forfeited your name long ago." Lyra watched from nearby, her wolf tense. "Who is he?" she asked quietly. The enemy Alpha answered first. I was once heir to the same throne. The revelation spread through the battlefield like wildfire. He's lying, one wolf whispered. But the Alpha simply laughed. I was the king's firstborn. His gaze locked onto Kyle. And you were the second. Kyle said nothing. The silence was answer enough. You were always stronger, the enemy continued. So father chose you. His eyes gleamed coldly. And exiled me. Lyra felt the tension in Kyle's wolf surge. The enemy's smile turned vicious. I didn't come for revenge, brother. His gaze lifted toward her. I came for power, because with a moon-born queen, a wolf could unite every pack in existence, even overthrow a king. Chapter 18. Rowan's fate is decided. The battle spread across the valley. Wolves clashed beneath the rising moon. Hunters retreated toward the forest as the rogue army began to falter. But one section of the battlefield remained brutal. The West Gate, where Rowan still fought. Blood soaked his fur. Silver burns marked his side. Yet he still stood between the hunters and the fortress entrance. A hunter raised a rifle. Rowan lunged first. The weapon shattered beneath his claws. The hunter fell. But the fight had taken its toll. Rowan staggered. Across the battlefield, Lyra Vale saw him fall to one knee. For a moment their eyes met. Years of memory flashed between them. The rejection, the humiliation, the pain, and the choice he had made tonight to fight for wolves he once called weak. Kyle approached her quietly. He won't survive another wave. Lyra watched Rowan struggle to stand again. What happens to him? She asked softly. Kyle answered honestly. That's your decision. Lyra hesitated. Then she stepped forward. Her voice carried across the battlefield. Rowan. The Alpha froze. He slowly turned toward her. Lyra's silver wolf shimmered in the moonlight. You don't owe me anything, Rowan said hoarsely. I know, she replied. The silence stretched between them. Then she spoke the words that ended the past. I forgive you. Rowan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, he turned back toward the battlefield. And charged, because forgiveness didn't erase consequences. But it gave him something worth fighting for until the end. Chapter 19. The final battle under the blood moon. The moon turned red. Slowly, unnaturally, a blood moon rose above the battlefield. Pack Elder Mira gasped from the fortress wall. It's the prophecy. The wolves below felt it instantly. Power surged through the air like lightning before a storm. The enemy Alpha looked up and smiled. Perfect timing. He shifted again. His wolf grew larger than before, dark, monstrous, because blood moons amplified power, especially for wolves tied to ancient bloodlines. Kyle's wolf snarled beside Lyra. Stay behind me, she shook her head. No. Her silver wolf stepped forward. Moonlight flared across her fur. The blood moon answered her. The battlefield brightened with silver light. The enemy Alpha lunged first. Kyle intercepted him. Their collision shook the valley. But this time Lyra moved too. Silver light surged through her body. Her wolf leapt. Claws struck the enemy's flank. He howled in shock. Because moonborn wolves did not fight like normal wolves. They fought like living echoes of the moon itself. The battle raged. 3 wolves clashing beneath the crimson sky. Until finally, Kyle struck. His jaws closed around the enemy's throat. The rogue army froze. The king held his brother pinned. For a moment the battlefield held its breath. Then Kyle ended it. The war was over. Chapter 20. The Queen of Wolves rises. Dawn arrived slowly. The battlefield lay quiet beneath pale morning light. Wolves moved through the valley, tending to the wounded and gathering survivors. The rogue army had scattered. The hunters had fled. The war had ended. At the center of the valley stood Alpha King Kael Vali. Beside him stood Lyra Vali. The wolves gathered before them slowly, hundreds, from multiple packs. Some had fought for Kael, others had once served the enemy, but now all eyes turned toward one figure. The silver wolf who had changed everything. Pack Elder Mira stepped forward. Her voice carried clearly across the valley. "The Moonborn has returned." The wolves bowed instinctively. Lyra looked at Kael uncertainly. "What are they doing?" Kael smiled faintly. "They're acknowledging their queen." Her heart skipped. "I'm not a queen." Kael stepped closer. "You are now." The bond between them pulsed warmly, not as a command, as a promise. The wolves knelt across the valley, one by one, pack by pack. Even Beta Darius bowed his head, because the war had not simply ended, a new era had begun. Kael took Lyra's hand. The sunlight broke across the mountains behind them. "Ready for what comes next?" he asked. Lyra looked across the Valley of Wolves, across a world that had nearly destroyed her, and now stood ready to follow her. She smiled. Yes, because the rejected Omega had become something far greater, the Queen of Wolves, and somewhere beyond the distant mountains. Another pair of ancient eyes had already noticed her rise, watching, waiting. The next war had already begun.